Welcome, everybody. I'm Carrie Campbell. I am the business growth and lead coaching guru with the Dog Gurus. And today we are live with Susan Briggs, our co founder. And if you are not familiar with the Dog Gurus, we help pet care businesses launch, grow, and profit. And we offer both training programs as well as business consulting programs. I will put a link in the chat there so you can see more about our group. And today we're going to be talking about staffing. And Susan, I'll let you kick us off.
Okay. Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics. Carrie and I were in Hershey last week. Hopefully we saw some of you there. But one of our probably most well-attended sessions we did was on staff onboarding, which is, I think both of us love to talk about this topic. So today, I think a key piece of that whole onboarding your team is picking the right training leader who will train the staff members in any department that you have, and then preparing them to have success in their role. And I think sometimes we think about who we assign to lead training the staff as an afterthought versus, I think, being proactive and setting everybody up for success. Because if you really think about it, how well you train staff from the beginning sets them up for long-term success or not in your business, and how well staff are trained is key for safety, not only for the staff member, but for the pets in their care, and efficiency. As we talked about onboarding, staff training is a large part of that. Onboarding is, I think, a bigger umbrella. Picking that right training leader and having a whole plan and process around staff training is a really good investment of your time. I think especially right now, and when there's a lot of staff turnover and you're trying to get good people you find to stick. So I don't know, Carrie, what you found as you had your business.
Yeah, I agree. Finding that key person on your team who loves people, has a lot of patience. I think that's really important. But also that they have a basic understanding and passion for what your mission, vision, and values are. I think that's really key as well. And that they can demonstrate those values. So.
Yeah, I think that's what's really important. Not only we say hire for culture and alignment with mission, vision, and values, but then you also have SOPs in your business, and you have some team members that follow those better than others. Your training leader needs to be one of those people that really follows the SOP if you're depending on them to train others. And I think one thing you said, traits not to overlook, are they have to be a people person and have patience, because when someone's new and in training, we forget how many basics there are in this industry that we don't even think about anymore. I think about putting on the different types of collars and harnesses. It's crazy how many different types of collars and harnesses there are. And so you can't expect everybody to know that. They probably know the ones they use for their own pets, but be viewed as a pet professional, they need to learn others. And so you've got to be able to step back in time when you didn't know anything about professional pet care and have the patience to explain those basics, and also to repeat yourself a lot. We talk a lot about, Carrie, I think it's Charlotte that says that we vomit everything we know all over people and then think they're going to remember and apply it. You need to go slower. It's one of those, the slower you go, the faster you get there with training. So your training plan should be spread out over weeks, not days. I would say even months. I think there's very few roles in a pet care service business that you can learn in 30 days or less. I don't know, what was your experience? Had daycare, what was your training timeline?
One of the things that I would talk to our staff about a lot is that when you're training somebody new, like you said, you're training the basics just on the different mechanics of collars and leashes, but you're also teaching them all about cleaning and the words that you use, which may be different than if they've had experience working at another facility. But on top of all of that, you're also teaching them a foreign language, which is the language of dogs, and them learning and understanding canine body language. So there's so many elements of it that if they don't take it slowly, you are just vomiting everything on them, and it's really easy for them to get lost. And I think that key training position, having somebody who is patient and is willing to answer questions over and over. We used to always say the only stupid question is the one that isn't asked, because if they don't feel comfortable with the person who's training them, then they're not going to ask those questions, and they will just be floating in the dark and not really understanding what exactly they're supposed to be doing in the position.
Yeah, I love that. And I think typically we tend to say well, the training leader is going to be the new employee's direct supervisor. And I don't think that has to be the case. I think you may have a really good lead technician that has those skills we talked about, the patience. They want to help other people succeed. They're kind. They don't mind answering questions. They follow the SOPs. You can give them the role of training leader. You would want to put it in their job description and have some compensation for the extra work. But I think it's more important to focus on them having the right traits and the desire to do the job than just like the position of supervisor. What do you think about that, Carrie?
I agree. What I found too is that often you will have people that may be excellent in their role, but they're not able to verbalize what they're doing.
Mhm.
And having that person that can really step by step verbalize their day and take that new person through the day, describing everything that they're doing, from just animal handling to, like you said, collars and leashes, as well as the SOPs. This is how we clean. It's really easy, I think, for someone to just say, this is how we do it, spray this, wipe this, but not really getting the nitty gritty details. So when you have somebody who has that really clear, concise communication skill, it makes it, they are a better kind of buddy mentor for the new hire.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, did you have any training fails that lessons learned that you would like to share? I know I definitely did as far as picking the wrong person. And I think I also, as a leader, didn't follow up to communicate my expectation of how long training should take. Um, so I think that was one of my fails that I didn't follow up soon enough to make sure that progress was being made.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing that we did was to make sure that not only did the new hire have notes on what their day was going to look like, but that the training mentor had a checklist that they knew what they had to cover. So they had their version of what the new hire's notes were for the day, and then what their responsibility was in teaching that new hire for the day. And we learned that by trial and error. And once we got that solidified, it made the onboarding process much better.
I love that, that everybody has their own checklist.
Mhm.
That's great. Absolutely. So we'd love to answer questions you have about setting up your formal staff training system. There's multiple parts. I think there's the knowledge and skills, and the dog gurus and other businesses have created tools that can help with that. We have our Knowing Dogs program. We have Pet Guru College. But it's really key that you also train on your own SOPs and how those things are then applied, and how you handle and manage dogs and keep things safe. How do you clean? So there's really, I think you think about the formal training and then the SOPs. And we did have a checklist that both used. Ours used the same checklist. But I think one thing we learned we had to add to that checklist was there's a difference between when you introduce someone to a skill or a procedure from when they can master it and do it on their own without help. So I think a key part of this is you introduce, it's the basics of when you're learning something new, someone explains it and probably shows it, because people learn different ways. And then they observe other people doing it. And then you ask them if they have any questions, and then ask them to do it. And you provide feedback while they're doing it. And they're going to have to do it multiple times before I think you can get to the point of mastery. And this may sound repetitive, but I think in my mind, this is the only way you can make sure that bad habits don't develop, is you've got to do that observation and give feedback. And then maybe a couple of weeks later, go back and check, and especially on the important skills, to make sure that, again, someone else hasn't shown them a different way to do it, or they forgot a step that's really important in your process. So, you know, that training role is really important, that they understand how adults learn and can adjust how they train based on who they have in front of them.
I agree. So Allison says that they're struggling getting new team members with experience or not. And I think that's a common theme around the country right now. And I would just add for that, if you don't have a join us or a career page on your website, that's a great place to start. Even if you do just a simple video with your phone, take a video with some testimonials from your existing employees about what makes it great working with you and try and upload that. You could post that and pin it on your Facebook page, or you can have that on your career page as well. And then somebody else asked, how long should you expect the new hire to take to learn the routine, SOPs, etc., not including dog language, which can take a while?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you plan to onboard for at least 90 days. In fact, and that would be the training process. If you think about everything they need to know about your company and their role, and that would include body language. I think they can learn a lot of body language in that 90 days. I think part of it is also figuring out what you train first so they can become productive employees while they're learning a lot of the other things. And I think a lot of us started with cleaning because that is one of the easier things to learn. And then you add, as they get comfortable, additional tasks and as they learn more. And so it's laying out the timeline so that they can be productive and contributing back while they're still going through that training process. What was your?
I think that you can create at least the first 4 to 6 weeks, have an outline of what they're going to do this week, what they're going to do the second week. And like you said, what does it take to get them from that basic introduction to actually mastering their role? Set that out in elements that are measurable either week to week, or if you do it like in 90 days, where do you want them to be at the end of the first month or the second month? And just being able to take a look at stepping back to both the training leader as well as the individual, because there's going to be differences of opinions. Maybe the new employee will think that they are a little farther along, but that person who's mentoring them or doing the training will have kind of their key observations that they can share back with leadership.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one thing we built in when we created the Pet Guru College program based on what we learned from people going through Knowing Dogs was we set up kind of normally at the end of every week that there's a formal meeting between the training leader and the trainee to talk about what they went over the week and to do some skill demonstrations so that you have those regular points of contact. And if there's gaps or the person is confused over something, you find that out right away. So that the key thing with new employees is you don't want them frustrated or feeling failure. So the more I don't think you can over communicate. So these regular meetings, hopefully you will find out where they're maybe overwhelmed or feeling like they're not doing well so that you can fix it right away. So they feel success and gain that confidence in their role, which will keep them around.
And I think the more open communication there is, the more they're going to stay engaged in the training process. So Allison also asked, do you give a new hire trial period to make sure they're suited for the job? And I would say yes. Ours was a 60-day, what we called introductory period. And that was at any point during that time frame, we could say that they did not pass their introductory period, and you could say specifics that there's the why, maybe because they weren't able to master a certain task, or it just may be that you can just get that gut feeling that they're not going to be suitable for the role. Did you have anything to add to that, Susan?
No, I definitely agree. And one of the first things, and we didn't do as good a job hiring. If I knew what I knew now back when I was running my business, I think I would have done a much better job. But
Yeah.
usually if our people washed out during the trial period, it was an attendance dependent. We couldn't rely on them. And that was very objective to see. But I would be adding to that more of the skill check. I think kind of one of the first things we had people learn were dog names. I wanted them to know the names of the dogs. And we had somebody fall out because they could just not remember the dog's names. And that was something we did really early on as part of their training, along with cleaning, and start to learn the dog's names.
It's so funny. We actually had somebody who, after the first 60 days, just could not get the whole scooping the poop down to what our standards were. And no matter how many times we shared the why that was so important for us, because we were known as the most cleanest facility in town and that we didn't want any scraps left. I can't believe I'm getting fired because I can't clean poop. And that's a thing. It's one of the things we do a whole lot of. So it's crucial that it's done correctly. Joe asked, what are your thoughts on having an employee always working a specific shift or rotating all employees through the schedule and learning all roles?
Hmm. I think that's a great question. I feel very strongly that people need to learn one role and master it first. And by master it, I mean they do it to your standards with assistance and help from the training leader or the boss before you start training them in other roles. Because, and I know that a lot of places have people work back of the house, in front of the house, but my gosh, that's a lot to learn, especially if you're offering multiple services. And I think we forget how much it is. So I think I love the idea of cross training and making employees more valuable, versatile, and valuable to your business.
Mhm.
But let them master one role first, maybe even one shift before you start moving them. And I think you can give incentives for them to work and learn other roles and shifts. I think we've been talking another way to try to hire and retain people is being more flexible, like with weekend shifts and holidays. And so that does mean that maybe more people are having to chip in and work a weekend shift or a weekend day. And I think those sometimes do operate different than weekdays. I think it's just make sure they're ready and committed to be engaged, as Carrie said, with you.
I agree. You mentioned having them learn the dogs' names. One of the things that we did at our facility was that when a dog came for their first evaluation visit, we would take a photograph of the dog and their owners next to this dog house we had in our lobby. So we had literally a photograph of every single owner and dog. And then we printed those just like a 4x6 print. And on the back, we had the dog's name and the owner's name. And on the front was just the photograph. So they became flashcards.
Yeah.
So it was just a way for the staff to go through them. And we may start with they're only going to learn the big dogs for a while and
Yeah.
just keep focused on that and then switch to the little dogs. But it was definitely a way to have a fun way for them to try and memorize all of the dogs' names, because even when they may master all of the skills they need of working in a group play area, when it came to working the front and even just bringing a dog forward or picking up a dog and taking it back to the play group in the mornings, if they couldn't identify the pet parent, at least they could recognize the dog and be, hey, Newton, how are you today? Come on, I'm so excited to see you. And that made the pet parent feel special because you were recognizing their dog and calling them by name.
Yeah. And then when you get your front desk staff, I was amazed at how all of us learned cars and we could match clients to cars.
Ours.
Not until I got into the pet business, I never would have thought that that would be a skill I had. But
Yeah. Do we have any other questions coming in?
yeah, Allison, you can never ask too many questions, so don't ever apologize asking us questions. That's what these are for, because Carrie and I can sit and chit chat, but we'd rather answer your questions. And I'm trying to think what we haven't touched on. Let's see.
I think one of the things that we talked about when we were in Hershey. Oh, actually, so Joe just asked, can you talk a little bit more about how you structured the position of a peer trainer?
Yeah, I think for me, mostly those people were leads. So they didn't necessarily, so the difference in my business from what I would call a lead or coordinator and a supervisor or manager was that the lead coordinator didn't have any people responsibilities. They weren't hiring. They might sit in on the interview or they might take a candidate onto the daycare floor and give input, but it wasn't their final decision on whether to hire. They also didn't have to give like constructive performance feedback. They would while they were training and coaching. They were more in charge of the workflow and making sure that the workflow tasks of the day were covered versus managing the people side. And that actually gave them, in my mind, more time to train and spend with new hires versus a supervisor who had a lot of other things to do, like interviewing and giving performance feedback and reports and stuff. So that's how I did it in my business. And so the coordinate, it also created a career path for those techs that or counselors that were really good. and did have people skills, it was a way to ease them into growing to be maybe a future supervisor or manager. Carrie, how do you do things?
Very similar. And I agree. It was just a nice way to be able to step them up in their role, but maybe in increments that they're comfortable with because they may not be ready to do the actual supervising of the employees. But when it comes to just directing workflow, it was something that they were so natural at that it was an easy step up for them in a career path. We also had a question from Adrian saying, aside from obviously bad behavior, what do you consider red flags in the first 60 days? Attendance would be the first one for me. If they are chronically late or within the first week or two, they've called out once, that's a red flag right there. The other thing for me in my business, because we were only daycare, the inability to create a rapport with dogs. Some people I think love dogs, but they don't understand the difference between being a leader in a group of dogs and being their friend. And just you could tell people who either giggled because something was awkward. They couldn't. I just think about things like a dog vomiting or eliminating inside the building and this like giggling and inappropriate reaction to something that's going to happen repeatedly during their course of working for you. And then I think mostly the big red flag for me was that inability to build a rapport with dogs, because if they can't build a relationship, if they can't get a dog to recall to them, they're going to have a difficult time leading a big group of dogs.
And I think for me, it would be coachability. Are they taking constructive feedback that you're giving and working towards doing it right? Or is there always a reason why that their way is the way or that they can't do it that way? So I would be looking, not taking feedback as potentially they're not coachable as a red flag. And then it's just, are they fitting in? Do they enjoy the role? Are they showing that initiative?
Yeah, I would say going along with that, when we've interviewed people who have been at a different facility in town, they may have a lot of skills or experience from that facility. But one of the things we speak directly to in our interview process is, are they willing to learn it a different way, the way that we do things? And if they come in and they are coachable in that sense and they are learning the new processes and procedures on how we do things, or are they just telling us we're wrong? The other place we did it this way, just making sure that they're able to adapt to a new way.
Yeah. And I think sometimes you also find those people that never take responsibility or accountability. It's always, that's not the way you showed me, or you didn't show me that, that kind of, it's never my fault.
Yeah.
And if you find that you're having people like that, then I think it's also important to go back and relook at your interview questions and scenarios to try to weed those out. And I think one of the best things I've read about hiring is, why do people fail in the role? What causes them not to do a good job? And if you can set up the interview questions to determine those people before you hire them, then most of the people you hire are either going to be 18 players or at least good at the role, even if they're not an 18 player. And if you eliminate the bad hires, then you're halfway, more than halfway there usually.
Joe just asked, how do you fit spot checks into the training process for cleaning and following the schedule of daily duties?
Oh, I think that's a great question. I would assign that, and it might be divided between the training leader and the actual supervisor. But I really feel like sometimes we don't want to have confrontation, and both of those roles need to understand that it is their job to ensure that they are going in and doing those QC checks. To me, that's a part of management role. Even with existing staff that are fully trained, you've got to check and make sure things are still being done according to your standards, because it consistently, procedures will slide off and no one ever knows why. And so I would build that into both persons' roles and make it very clear. Like Carrie had checklists that the training leader had of what they were supposed to check on. And to me, the supervisor or manager, someone should be responsible for every checklist in your building, ensuring that what was checked off was actually done and that was done according to your SOP. And maybe they don't check every single item every day, but I would be checking some items every day like that so that you catch it early. Hopefully that answered your question, Joe. And I don't know, Carrie, if you had other thoughts on.
No, I agree. I think that just having the ability to either electronically review your checklist if there's something that you've got in your point of sale. I know Ginger and Pet Exec have those checklist options that are electronic, or if you're doing something that's actually on paper, and you are you filing those someplace so you can go back and review either at the end of the day, or you can look at them at the end of the week. And then just, I used to always take a moment just to stop in and talk to a new hire, especially at the end of each day, their first week, and just check in and see, how are they enjoying it? Is it overwhelming? Is there anything that we can do to help them learn better? Because like you said, adult learners, everybody learns differently, and just making sure that we're doing something that's within their realm of learning. I've got a question for Becky. I work for a shelter, and it's very hard to find people willing to work with some of our dogs with behavior issues. You mentioned Pet Guru College. Could you tell me more about that? Always looking for quality training for staff. That's a great question.
Yeah, thanks, Becky. Yeah, we actually designed Pet Guru College to be a true onboarding system. So we looked at the most common roles in pet care and set up the knowledge and skills, foundational training, as well as soft skills training we built in for those roles. And it goes from anywhere from 8 weeks to 12, 13 weeks of programs. If you go to our website, I don't know if Carrie, if you can find the link even to put it in there, we could put the link in the chat, but there's a place where you can schedule a demo, and either Carrie or Charlotte could give you a demo so you could actually see inside the program, which would be great. Our website's thedoggerus.com. And then we have staff training memberships, I think, is where you find Knowing Dogs and Pet Guru College. We know that the knowledge and skills that pet professionals need are pretty standard, which is what we provide. And then we refer to your specific SOPs on how you do, like the cleaning or feeding or working with the dogs, the handling to you.
So I put two links, one that's directly to the scheduling, and then one that just takes you to the page about Pet Guru College.